Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red. And let's get on to the running back situation here. And this is, we look at the 23 roster here. You have Anthony Grant as a senior coming back, Ramir Johnson. Can't believe he's only a junior. It seems like he's been here for six years. Gabe Irvin Jr., the Hulk now. He's a sophomore. Emmett Johnson, redshirt freshman. Quentin Ives, true freshman. And then the one non-scholarship guy that I mentioned that we'd put down here is Barrett Liebentritt, Omaha Skutt kid who went to Notre Dame, transferred back, most likely a starting fullback, or at least the guy that's going to be out there a lot as a fullback. And then we have Janarian Bonner. We're going to list him twice, tight end and as a fullback. Played quite a bit of fullback in the spring game. He's up to 220 now. He was listed at 200 back in the spring roster. Let's start with you, Mike. When you look at this here, running backs, you look at that group of five. Does it matter to you who's number one the same way with QB1, or do you see a two or three top guys that you want to see getting out there?
I don't know. I just see a lot of question marks, I guess, because you have a program and you want a bell cow. There's no bell cow here. Like, we thought Anthony Grant was that last year, and Gabe Irvin took the scene in the offseason. He's probably has the Kool-Aid award next to Rob. So I don't know who you have. And then it's Ramir Johnson. Like, last year he played wide back, but he played so wide he was on the sidelines the entire season.
Yeah.
So to me, I would think that Anthony Grant and Gabe Irvin are going to be the guys, the 1-2 punch, and then you probably get creative with Ramir. But I don't know. It's a question mark. I want somebody to take the job and run with it.
Mm-hmm. I don't disagree with you either, because even yesterday I keep referencing the press conferences just because I like to quote what comes right out of the coach's mouth. But when he was naming the running backs as far as who he was happy with, Anthony Grant was the number one, Gabe Irvin was number two. Then he said Ramir, and then he paused for a second and he said, "Oh, and Emmett Johnson." So I kind of take that as like that's the order of how he's thinking about the running backs. Does that make sense? Like in that order. Sure. So I'm kind of that's what I took away from that, listening to that. And I actually had to go back and get that list again. So I listened to it a couple more times just to make sure I got it in the right order. But pretty interesting to me, because I still think Grant is going to be that guy. Michael Sevier said something interesting on your show last week, actually, about Anthony Grant and how he felt about him. I'll let you guys get into that a little bit since we're talking about the depth, but those are some pretty interesting comments that he had about his feeling on the way that Anthony Grant ran.
Yeah. I think Michael Sevier kind of I wouldn't say he echoed what we think, but he got off to a good start last year, albeit against competition that probably wasn't the greatest. And then as the season wore along, it looked like he was Peter Panning it or dancing a little bit more than hitting a hole, just kind of like running into the backs and the butts of his O-linemen, it seemed like. Mm-hmm. But such a promising start. And it's like, okay. And we even joked about it. We had our whole like bell cow thing, right? With the Saturday Night Live and the Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
Right. He's the bell cow. And then it just kind of faded. It looked like his legs are getting kind of heavier and just didn't really emerge and didn't get the 1,000-yard mark. God, I hope we can have a 1,000-yard running back again. Divine had a great year in 2018. But I feel like with the kind of offense that Rule wants to run, you got to have someone you can depend on. I look at this list, and you know how you're playing a video game and it's like a create a player and the guy's face is blacked out, right? He doesn't have a face. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I see here. And it's a little concerning. And you hope that with EJ Barthel and with his coaching that he's unlocked something from Anthony Grant or Gabe Irvin, who I think will be RB1 personally, but will he unlock something out of these guys?
With the live viewers right now, if you're watching this, put down in the comments, who do you think, if you look at this list of five, who's going to be the first one out of these five you think that will get 1,000 yards? Could be somebody this year. It could be Quentin Ives 4 years from now. It's going to take us that long. Hopefully not. But I mean, is there 1,000-yard, or you can say there's not a 1,000-yard rusher in the bunch. I mean, all is fair, right? Gabe Irvin, I was at the Illinois game with Mac and Rob a couple years ago, and we saw him
bringing that up.
We saw that first game of Irvin, and we loved the start, but then he had the injuries, right? Grant, there's parts of me when I look at Grant last year, and I think half of it's Grant and half it's Whipple. I blame a lot on Whipple and offense. And we were a Jekyll and Hyde offense anyways. Ramir last year, I mean, going into last year, it was Ramir's the guy. Geez, they're gonna, like you said, they're Mike, the wide back thing, and they're gonna get him on the field the whole time, and then he never sees the field. Emmett Johnson's got a ton of speed, and we've started to see that in little bits and glimpses. There's talent there. Do we have a scheme? And the reason that we include those fullbacks is because there's going to be a different look in how we run the ball this year. There's going to be times when we get to the wide receivers next, we're not ready for that. But when we get to that, there's people that are going to be freaking out about, do we have 3 and 4 wide receivers to throw in the field? And I'm telling you, we're going to get in some 12 and 21 and 22 personnel where you're going to see a lot of these guys, maybe multiple of these guys on the field at the same time.
Yeah.
Dave?
Hey, yeah, Honky. First of all, I'd rather have you be our OC than Mark Whipple ever again. So, but knowing that you've got, let's see, your top 3 here, Grant, Irvin, and Ramir, have different running styles, right? Gabe's a little bit more like a hammer. Grant's going to try to make guys miss. How would you deploy these guys, like in the sequence of a game, to maybe maximize their ability, right? Would you have Irvin out there in the first quarter to hit that middle linebacker over and over again, and then maybe that deploy Grant later and make the guy miss because he's waiting for the hit, or some other approach? I mean, is there a way to actually use these guys in a way that actually enhances their individual abilities because how you've deployed them?
It's a great question there. I mean, I think Irvin certainly he's a big, strong, powerful back. So whether that's on a play one thing, Grant could be a guy on play one. He ran the same way at the beginning of the season that he ran at the end of the year. He was jumping all over the place. He was just getting away with it against North Dakota and all that. He's not a bad guy to start a game off with. And he gives you some ability to bust a move and get an extra 5 yards. And then to your point there, Dave, now we're at 3rd and 1 on a drive where we've had 8 straight plays. And now you're putting in Irvin, and he's lining up right behind Liebentritt, and we've got double tight ends out there. Again, for all the folks that are going to be frustrated about, receiver leaving the team, sorry that they don't participate on that play. This is 3rd and 1, and we need to get it. And the 3rd and 1 is going to look different than a year ago. We're not in 5 wides with the shotgun and having the quarterback running up the middle. So, to your point there, Dave, you can do things like that to kind of spread that out a little bit. And then can they get creative? I'm going to keep using that word over and over again because I never saw it a year ago. Can you find a way to get Ramir Johnson on the field at the same time that you have Irvin on the field? Can you find ways to get multiple guys? Janarian Bonner, this dude's a fullback. We saw him get the first carry of the game in the spring game. And yet you look at him, he came here as a 4-star wide receiver, and he's playing tight end now. So when we talk about guys being a lot of different positions, he's a great example of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, Mike, to your point, I don't think anyone in that staff has kind of echoed the bell cow approach. It's always been about the community and just trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to work this? Just like Dave was talking about, how are you going to employ 2 or 3 guys throughout through a game? And so, like, in my personal opinion, if you're kind of rocking with the thought that you want to finish the fourth quarter, I mean, maybe you run Ramir Johnson out there. He's like the lightning, right? And then in the fourth quarter, when it's time to just beat somebody down, you throw Anthony or you throw Irvin out there. And I mean, it's a totally different approach than what we've seen. We've always asked for the bell cow, the bell cow, the bell cow. We had a freaking drop on our soundboard for it a year ago. And now you're kind of looking at it and you're like, well, we have 3 capable guys that have all played good time. So, like, use them all, right? Like, we don't need a bell cow. If you've got 3 guys that can kind of go out there and just kind of throw in different things at certain times, then you might as well use them.
Are you saying more like play the hot hand, or?
I mean, play the hot hand, or make a strategy going into a game and say, look, the first 2 quarters, we're just going to throw Ramir out there and maybe Gabe, and we're just going to start kind of being flashy with it and just trying to get the fun yardage, right? The dancing around. And then when it comes time to the fourth quarter, when it really matters, throw Anthony Grant out there and just pound these dudes, or mix it, with Gabe Irvin, whatever you want to do.
You hit on exactly the 2 points I wanted to touch on. You mentioned, the lightning thunder. I see Gabe Irvin and Anthony Grant being that lightning approach, like not quite, 05 USC. We're not there.
Like Calvin Jones, Derek Brown, at least.
Yeah. But so like that kind of combo, seeing that power back and Gabe Ervin and the speed back and Anthony Grant, having that kind of approach, I see that being very reasonable. And then you talked about all last season, we talked about our bell cow, where with the running back room specifically, we wanted to talk about who is our number one running back, who is our bell cow. I don't see a bell cow on that board. But this season, or the end of this season, we've talked a lot about the dogs in the locker room. Who's our dogs?
Right.
I see 3 dogs on that list right there. I don't need a bell cow.
Right.
I got 3 dogs that whatever situation I need them, I can find somebody that can get the job done. And I think that is the most encouraging thing I see on this roster.
You know, Connor, to close out the running backs here, I want to say one of the best shows I think of the offseason that I've watched. I know, Rob, you talked about it quite a bit. You guys had Ken Kalen and Keith Jones.
Yeah.
I back, Keith Touchdown Jones. And, I don't know that we have a Keith Jones when I look at this list, but to your point, I see 2-3 guys that can get the ball in the end zone, that can move the chains. I see a quarterback that has some legs that can, move the chains on a 3rd and 4th down too. I mean, there's a lot of things that can stress a defense. So probably to your point, if we have a bell cow, we don't know who it is now. It would be, just projecting to say that we have one. Maybe we do. Maybe one of them steps out and has 1,200 yards and we don't know it. But I know that we've got guys that have shown enough already, that have carried enough, balls in big games that, I feel good coming into the season. There's a lot worse running back rooms that we've had at this time going into game 1 than what we have right now.
100%.
Honky, I got a question for you then on that one, and it's kind of what I've been trying to ask here. So goal to go situation inside the 5. Who are you bringing in off this running back squad to get the ball in the end zone?
Well, number 1, I'm bringing in Borkature and I'm bringing in Fedoni and I'm bringing in Bonner as a 3rd. Maybe you could do crackbacks the way they did with Brewington. I bring in Liebentritt. And then on top of all that, I guess if I'm just going for pure muscle, I mean, I'm going off of photos from social media. Irvin in there. I mean, it's literally like calling the whole
hubba. My Lord.
I mean, we need to fall forward for 2 yards. Yeah, it's Gabe Ervin behind all that beef. And let's play Big Ten football the way that 2 years ago, that Illinois disaster, part of that was in game 1 of Brett Bielema, and Bielema knew how to play Big Ten football, and he would line up and have 8 guys on the line of scrimmage, for cripe's sakes. And that's what Minnesota does with unbalanced lines and 400-pound linemen. That's what they do. And a lot of times they just don't fumble the ball, and they just figure out a way to fall forward for 3 yards and keep your great high-powered offense off the field. And they do that. Well, we need to be able to do that too. And for any Husker fan of any age of like us, this is what we saw for years. So, that's what I want to see. So again, I don't know that we have the bell cow. And I think that's a very good question. I don't know that we have it. I don't know that we need it either.
Right. We tried the whole bell cow thing with Anthony Grant last year, and we've already talked about it. At some point, the wheels just kind of fell off and we got tired and beat down. And then who was there to back it up?